Hello again, YouTube. It's wonderful to speak to you all again. Hope you're all keeping well, healthy, and happy. In this video, we're going to be exploring the area of parental abandonment and how this makes us very susceptible to mind control. Now, this is an area that not a lot of people are willing to look into because it means looking into ourselves. And the implications of it all are staggering because it shows, I think, very directly and very succinctly why we're finding society at large being so drawn towards totalitarianism and authoritarianism, right? And I think it goes a long way to explaining social justice warriors as well. Now, to understand it, we actually need to look into the realms of academia and psychiatry. So, I'm going to read you an article here by Professor Claudia Black, PhD, which was published on the 4th of June in 2010. And this article is titled, Understanding the Pain of Abandonment. Living with repeated abandonment experiences creates toxic shame. When children are raised with chronic loss, without the psychological or physical protection they need, and certainly deserve, it is most natural for them to internalize incredible fear. Not receiving the necessary psychological or physical protection equals abandonment. And living with repeated abandonment experiences creates toxic shame. Shame arises from the painful message implied in abandonment that you are not important, you are not of value. This is the pain from which people need to heal. For some children, abandonment is primarily physical. Physical abandonment occurs when the physical conditions necessary for thriving have been replaced by lack of appropriate supervision, inadequate provision of nutrition and meals, inadequate clothing, housing, heat, or shelter, or physical or sexual abuse. Children are totally dependent on caretakers to provide safety in their environment. When they do not, they grow up believing that the world is an unsafe place, that people are not to be trusted, that they do not deserve positive attention and adequate care. And that's just the physical aspect of it. Emotional abandonment occurs when parents do not provide the emotional conditions and the emotional environment necessary for healthy development. I like to define emotional abandonment as occurring when a child has to hide a part of who he or she is in order to be accepted or to not be rejected. Having to hide a part of yourself means it is not okay to make a mistake. It's not okay to show feelings. Being told that the way that you feel is not true. Being told things like, you have nothing to cry about, and if you don't stop crying, I will really give you something to cry about. That didn't hurt. You have nothing to be angry about. It is not okay to have needs. Everyone else's needs appear to be more important than yours. It is not okay to have successes. Accomplishments are not acknowledged and are many times discounted. I know this is resonating a lot with a lot of you. Other acts of abandonment can occur when children cannot live up to the expectations of their parents. These expectations are often unrealistic and not age appropriate. Children are held responsible for others' behavior. They may be constantly blamed for the actions and feelings of their parents. Disapproval towards children is aimed at their entire beings or identity rather than a particular behavior, such as telling a child he or she is worthless when he or she does not do his or her homework, or that she or he is never going to be a good athlete because he or she missed the final catch of the game. Many times abandonment issues are fused with distorted, confused, or undefined boundaries, such as when parents do not view children as separate beings with distinct boundaries, or when parents expect children to be extensions of themselves, or when parents are not willing to take responsibility for their feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, but expect children to take responsibility for theirs. When parents' self-esteem is derived through the child's behavior. When parents treat children with no parent-child distinction. Abandonment plus distorted boundaries at a time when children are developing their sense of worth is the foundation for the belief in their own inadequacy and the central cause of their shame. Abandonment experiences and boundary violations are in no way indictments of a child's innate goodness and value. Instead, they reveal the flawed thinking, false beliefs, and impaired behaviors of those who hurt them. Still, the wounds are struck deep in their young hearts and their minds, and the very real pain can still be felt today. The pain will stay with them, becoming a driving force in their adult lives. Now, that article is taken from Professor Black's work-changing course. And I would encourage you all to read that, because it's very, very insightful, and it reveals a great deal about the mechanics of how these particular things come about. It also imprints on people who have suffered this a blueprint for future pattern recognition, because we start seeing or seeking out even these particular same patterns in the people that we invite into our lives. So we're trying to look for the same patterns of behavior in others that feel familiar to us or comfortable to us in the people that we have in our lives. And that's a major point, I think. Now, I'm going to be including that particular article in a link to it in the description, hopefully below this video. But that's only part of the picture. So, not only is there the parental abandonment phenomenon, but we have to grapple with something else that comes with that, which is a form of Stockholm Syndrome. Now, Stockholm Syndrome, let me read out this to you. Stockholm Syndrome is a spontaneous identification under stress to an individual or individuals who are violating one's freedoms. It's sort of a survival mechanism, really. Psychiatrist Frank Ochberg of the National Institute of Mental Health states that the appearance of the following conditions defines Stockholm Syndrome. The victim has positive feelings towards his or her captor. Now, I just want to pause there for 1 second to say something. Now, the captor could be anybody. This is the key thing, right? It could be the now imprinted archetype of the parental figures, or it could be the state. And you'll start to see why I'm mentioning the state here, because statism is a very interesting ideology whereby you are switching the parental archetype for state control. Okay, and you'll start to see why this is so important later on. So again, just to reiterate, the first thing that shows or defines Stockholm Syndrome is that the victim has positive feelings towards his or her captor. The second stage, they have negative feelings towards those who want to help them escape. Now this is interesting because people like myself who go out there to try and teach people how they are mentally imprisoned in their own thinking and inside their own delusional traps, framed inside a very hypnotic trance, are seen as a problem. That's why you'll see, for example, social justice warriors use the term problematic so much. That's why you'll see communists use the term problematic so much. Because for them it is actually problematic, because that's their internal feelings, where they have negative feelings towards anybody who's trying to free them. Okay? Another thing that shows or defines Stockholm Syndrome is that the victim develops a delusion that their feelings are reciprocated by their captor. I.e., for example, that, oh, the state really cares about me, or that the communist system really cares about me, or that the socialist system really cares about me, or other social justice warriors care about me. It's a delusional state. Defense mechanisms of rationalization, guilt reduction, and identification in reverse begin to appear. So you begin to identify with the state, and then you begin to rationalize why you feel that way. That's why you'll see so much rational discourse being applied after the mind control has taken place, because they're trying to rationalize their feelings, right? They can't understand them. This is known in clinical psychiatry as induced psychotic disorder, and is listed in the official diagnostic manual of the American Psychiatric Association, or the DSM-4. It provides the most compelling evidence of the destructive mental and emotional devastation caused by the isolation, loneliness, and abandonment experienced by someone. Okay? So those things we just spoke about in terms of parental abandonment and the potential feelings of isolation or loneliness or abandonment itself begin to dictate a destructive emotional and mental state appearing. Now, what will happen through this induced psychotic disorder is that a dominant figure or institution wears down the sufferer's defences by repetition or by impositional behaviour. And the sufferer begins to adopt the same ideas, no matter how irrational they actually are. They're unwilling to question the ideas. You'll have to excuse me. Another siren. This happened in the last video I was shooting as well. It seems to be bad timing, I don't know why. Incidentally, that's not a police siren, that's an ambulance that went by. Anyway, getting back to this. So, no matter how irrational the belief systems that are held by the dominant figure or institution, they go unquestioned. Now, there are three types of induced psychotic disorder. Imposed psychosis, where force is applied. Simultaneous psychosis, where people develop independent delusions, which happen to coincide with the delusions of others. And communicated psychosis, where even after separation from the dominating force, they still retain their delusions, and in fact the delusions expand. Now, according to Dr. Alexander Graunik, Dr. Kenneth Kender, Dr. R.D. Goldney, and especially Dr. Chris Hatcher, who is the foremost expert in Stockholm Syndrome, there are several steps to achieving total mind control, and he actually does use the specific term, mind control. Step 1, isolation and control of the person's environment. Okay? And we see this, our environments all around us are actually ones of isolation and control, which further amplifies the already previously existent feelings of abandonment and isolation and loneliness, and that just takes them a step further. Step 2, physical, emotional or sexual abuse and or other manipulations. Okay? And in a sense, any or all of these could apply to the society that we're in, to some greater or lesser degrees, right? We see all the time, for example, people that are in positions of power abuse those powers. We saw the child abuse scandals which happened in the British institutions, for example, and even in the American institutions with Jerry Sandusky. In Great Britain we had the Jimmy Savile scandal, right? We also saw the Rotherham scandal. We've got these very same types of abuse occurring with the migrant crisis in Europe. The list goes on and on. So these are being perpetrated on our persons without our understanding it, on our psyches. Disorientation. This is step 3, sorry. Disorientation, removal of their identity in favor of a number or a dehumanizing word. Now I'm going to extrapolate this a little bit, and I'm going to say that this could be applied to your social security number or your national insurance number, or to virtually any other number that you're assigned instead of who you are. And this begins the process of dehumanization, I would argue. Step 4. Destroy a person's sense of privacy. Are we seeing that step in action? Yes, we are. For example, we've got clandestine agencies that are perpetrating cyber spying programs, data collection programs. Your data isn't safe, right? Your personal information isn't safe. You've got identity theft even. So your sense of privacy, we've got cameras everywhere, right? We know from Snowden's revelations that they can be activated at any point, at any time, in any way by the governmental agencies. So our sense of privacy no longer exists. So let's see here. How many steps have we gone through so far? 1, 2, 3, 4. All 4 steps. We're actually going through all 4 steps. Step 5. Control of food and water. Is this happening? Your food supply is already controlled. Okay? We've got companies and corporations that are not really companies and corporations. They're more pseudo-governmental corporations, like Monsanto, for example, right? Who want to control when and where grains can grow, right? You've got industrial farming taking place, where everything is now becoming centralized in terms of our food supply. So again, can it be argued that this is occurring? I would say probably yes. And that's all a result of governmental policy, by the way. This is not, and this is why I argue so heavily against statism. Okay, anyway, let's carry on. Step 6. Punishment for no rhyme or reason. So, minor infractions, for example, inside the bounds of the statutes, not the federal laws, but the statutes, not even the state laws, but the statutes, right? Where local councils, local city councils, local governmental institutions, whatever designation they have, depending on where you are, you find yourself being imposed on for minor infractions, which jaywalking, for example, right? What is that? Right? You're really being punished for no good reason. You want to walk across the street, you want to take that risk on your own shoulders, of course you should be allowed to do this, right? But we get punished constantly all the time. Traffic tickets for no good reason, right? You get the pedantic traffic wardens, for example, right? Or getting ticketed for parking near a fire hydrant or whatever, right? Not that I'm advocating that, I'm just saying, right? Or sometimes it isn't even that serious. It's the tiniest of things. Sometimes you don't even know that those statutes are enforced, and you get punished for it. Okay? Another avenue where we see this extrapolated to might be false accusations. This is a more important thing, I think, where you get this trial by media sort of phenomenon which happens. There's no more sense of innocent until proven guilty, right? So, oftentimes, within the larger picture, I would say there is punishment without reason. Anyway, I could be wrong about that, but, that would be one perceptive view. Step 7. Require the victim to ask permission for everything. Again, we kind of touched on that with step 6 a little bit, didn't we? So we're having to ask permission for everything we do. Originally, in most societies in the developed world, we had free speech, and that included the right to gather and protest without prior notification. In the UK today, and I think the same thing is true of the United States, now you've got a lot of control over protests, right? You have to notify the local authorities before you go and protest. You have to ask their permission to exercise your rights. So step 7 is definitely happening. I don't think there's any denying that. Step 8. Establish dominion via imposition to demonstrate this is what your new life is going to be like. Again, I'm not going to get into that too much, but I think that is also reflective of what is happening in society today. Step 9. Become the only source of food and water, as well as information. So access to information, the media, and news outlets. You control those as well as the food supply. So again, I would argue that's happening with the centralization of mass media, right? Thankfully, they've only got a 6% trust rating among the public now, but this was definitely being put in place. You can see that, right? Step 10. Present a model of future behavior which will please the captor. So you set out what the ideal model citizen would be, a compliant individual. Step 11. Allow small privileges, making the captive more confused and more pliant. So you're allowed to do small things, and thus you think that you have unrestricted freedom, which most certainly you do not. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll start to realize you actually have almost zero freedoms left, really, in true terms, because of the totalitarian, socialist, communist ideals that are being put into practice. Okay? Step 12. Obtain signatures on documents, symbolically handing over more and more power to the captor. Now, I want you to keep something in mind. All of these steps are in relation to Stockholm Syndrome, as is suffered by hostages or by, these kind of people that get themselves into these situations where somebody captures them, right? But look how closely they mirror the current conditions of society. I want you to pay attention to that especially. Okay? Step 13. Appear omnipresent by showing your presence unexpectedly. Now, we could argue, I think, that the apparatus of the state certainly does that, doesn't it? Step 14. Eventually, the victim will recruit others to the cause, cult, or captor's wishes. That's very interesting, because what are we seeing with, whether it's Marxists, whether it's socialists, whether it's these social justice warriors, whether it's people that are involved in cults like Scientology or Satanism or whatever else it might be. They want to go out there and they want to recruit people to their cause, right? And this is also true of Islam. In Islamism, they want to try and recruit people into that, radicalize them, right? So I think we can safely say that this is a very real situation that is happening. Okay? We are living under mind control already. I want you to understand this point. You're already controlled. If you found yourself listening to this and then realizing, wait a minute, all of that actually really describes my situation. If you feel that way, that it describes your situation, then I would say you're beginning the process of dehypnosis. Because you're coming out of that state. You're awakening. This is the whole point of the videos that I'm making and that I'm putting up here on YouTube, so that you begin to dehypnotize. Right? Deprogramming. When people try and bring people out of cults, right, they deprogram them. This is part of that. Okay, almost all of my videos thus far have been to this end, by the way, as well as highlighting geopolitical things. Now, the thing is that people who want to control society, who are authoritarian, whether it's the foot soldiers such as the SJWs or the people that are funding these programs, right, they are trying to use your pain and your trauma against you. This is important to understand also, because they want to invert that or use that towards pushing totalitarianism. You are the mechanism by which they will either do this or will be prevented from doing this. Okay? So, don't think that you are powerless in this situation. They want you to think that, right? This is why I was talking about the mass hypnosis being perpetrated on people. I am willing to bet the farm on the fact that you are not aware of all the things that I've just spoken about fully. Okay, I'm willing to bet the farm on that, because I haven't heard any other person address any of these things. Okay, so the chances are you won't be aware of them, that this is what's been going on with your head, right? In a sense, you were already born into bondage and you just don't know it, right? You're born into enslavement, mental enslavement, emotional enslavement, right? And your goal in this life is to liberate yourself from that, to be free of that. Because almost 99% of the time, people say and do things in life and they don't realize the origins of what they're saying and doing. Okay? You might find yourself saying certain things and you won't know why you've said them. You might find yourself doing certain things and you won't know why you've done them. And this is all a result of hypnotic suggestion. Okay? All of it. And yes, hypnosis, by the way, can include using force. Okay? This is what a lot of people don't know. What's happened is that when the word hypnosis is used, people automatically assume that it must mean that stage hypnosis nonsense, right? Or where they help you quit smoking, which obviously hasn't worked for me, right? Basic things like this. But they want to make you believe that that's what the full extent of hypnosis involves. It doesn't. Okay, it really doesn't. Hypnotizing someone is merely being able to persuade them or to push them towards your point of view, to accepting that completely. And you can do that with totalitarianism, and you can do that with authoritarianism, and you can do that with virtually any ideology that supports that, because of the force of will involved in that. Okay? That's what makes people susceptible, is not only do we start off at a biological disadvantage because we're born not understanding logic. Again, I touched on this briefly previously. We're not born understanding logic, right? So we rely upon others to teach us the principles and the mechanics of logic. And once they do, then we start to become freer. Okay? But up to that point, We don't know. And that's why we find, in most cases, most people, I would say, are stuck in a state of permanent infancy. We're constantly infantilizing people. Have you noticed this? I don't know if you've noticed this. I'm sure you guys have, because most of the people that watch this channel, I find, are very capable intellectually, right? So maybe a lot of you did. But in general terms, people don't notice it. Okay? Why do you think that Hollywood at this point is making all these movies and cartoons and whatever else geared towards making you revert back to your childhood? Because that's the state at which you're most vulnerable, as I've just explained. Okay? So when you're in that vulnerable position or point in your mind, then they can start messing with it. This is the primary thing. Okay? And this is why the people that presently govern society in true terms are master manipulators. Okay, they're master manipulators because they know exactly what they are doing. All the things I have described to you today are all 100% verifiable. Okay, and you can look up these articles and the people that I've mentioned who have done these studies. Okay, or that have outlined these the steps that I was speaking about. You can look at that, and you'll find it to be true, objectively. But the other thing is that the people that do these things at the top of the food chain, right, already knew all of this many decades ago. Okay? Many decades ago, they set out to do exactly this, i.e. to put you into a mental enclosure, a mental box, outside of which you cannot think. This is why we even use the term thinking outside the box. But they don't want that. Okay? If you're somebody who wants to impose a totalitarian system on someone, the last thing you want is for that person to become individuated, whereby they are no longer part of the collective, okay? And they are asserting their own individual rights and freedoms. They do not want that. Somebody asked me this question on the very last video I did. Why is it that why would you think that the communist states that still exist today do want to destroy America, the United States? And they kind of actually answered their own question. It was because the United States represents the experiment, the absolute experiment in freedom. Now, if you're a totalitarian or you're an authoritarian, you don't want anybody to have that freedom, okay? You're going to try and find sneaky and subtle ways, many of which I've described in my previous videos, of controlling those people's reality. Manipulating it to the point where their perception is distorted. This is hypnosis in a nutshell. And they can use all of your traumas and all of your pains to accomplish this. If something's a sore point for you, they'll utilize that. They will do that. Okay? If you're overly empathetic, they will use that. If you have too many strong feelings about something, they will use that. Okay? If you're not approaching things from a logical, rational standpoint where you're able to view objective reality, then you're already in their pocket. Okay? That's why they're so heavily against objective truth. They're starting to teach people in schools these days relativistic mathematics. Understand how insane that is. Okay? Where they're teaching kids that 2 plus 2 equals 5 or can equal 5. That is a ludicrous statement. It's a ludicrous statement. It has no basis or bearing in fact, in factual truth. Okay? But why are they doing that? Because they want to distort kids' minds, right? This is as simple as it gets. Okay? Because that's the next generation of adults, isn't it? Right? So this is the thing. This is the deception, the distortion that is taking place on a grand scale. And it's been succeeding. Okay? But now what's happening is there are more and more people like myself, like yourself, who are deprogramming and dehypnotizing. Because we've studied these things. So what happens is we can speak from the point of view of an expert. And this scares them. This is why they're trying so very, very hard to silence us all. Let me give you a recent example. In my own case, right? My YouTube videos have been demonetized. In some places, I hear they're censored. My view counts are getting suspended. Okay? This is happening to me. Or to my channel, at least, not to me directly, but to my channel, right? And why would they go to these lengths? And it's not just my channel. Lots of people have had this happen to them. Why are they having to go to these lengths? Because they know we are having an impact. We are truly teaching people, and obviously, the last thing they want is a free-thinking person. Because that challenges their own power base, right? So this is what it comes down to, you know? And you've got to break free if you are trapped in that mindset. You have to break free of that. And you have to do a lot of work on yourself to heal yourself, right? This is one of the reasons why I'm constantly recommending psychoanalysis to people, right? Because it is an enormously helpful tool to achieving a deeper understanding of your subconscious self and the influences at play within it, i.e. all the lines of code and programming that have been put in there, not by you, but by other people. Okay? Anyway, I'll leave it there for this video, but if you've watched this, thank you again. I'm truly appreciative of all the excellent feedback I've been getting, as well as all your questions, all your comments. It's been wonderful. And I hope to speak to you in future about more in-depth subject matters as well, in other areas. So thank you very much for watching.